Welcome to the Funnel Reboot Podcast, brought to you by Marketing What's New. Let's get into today's show.
Hey, Glenn here. Welcome to Funnel Reboot. Today we'll talk about how to know if you're doing pay-per-click marketing right. First, I want to give a quick PSA. You've probably heard that Universal Analytics is being sunsetted. Google is only giving us until June 30th of 2023. And we should be getting on to Google Analytics 4, which is the replacement product. You want to give yourself plenty of time before then because you're migrating to an entirely new platform. Okay, on to today's show. Copywriters have editors. Podcast hosts, even this one, have audio producers. For those who run pay-per-click campaigns, they have account auditors. I wanted to dig into what the process is of how someone audits an account, and I've got just the person for it. My guest, after receiving a degree in psychology, worked as a barista at Starbucks and a local high-end hotel. In a conversation about career paths with the hotel's HR manager, she heard about the British Columbia Institute of Technology's co-op and classroom-based marketing communications program, so she enrolled. And her first co-op internship was with a startup automotive marketing company, where she was supposed to shadow their pay-per-click marketing manager. But after her first week, the supervisor resigned, so an executive asked her to take over. And she hovered between that gig and doing her marcomm certificate, and after graduating, she worked there full-time, growing out their PPC team. That led to working as a PPC expert at an agency, and within 3.5 years, she rose to a director-level position there. In 2021, she went out on her own, founding Good AF Consulting, which focuses on helping find and fix a brand's PPC and SEO issues. Wanting to exercise her passion for sharing time and knowledge with new marketers, she's also gone back to BCIT as an instructor in the very marketing program she graduated from. In addition to teaching, she mentors new marketers, writes, and works hard to leave the industry in a better state than the way she found it. Please welcome someone who's been named to PPC Heroes' list of the top 25 people in PPC. Let's talk to Amalia Fowler.
You and I've had a chance. We've met at places like HeroConf, and I've also had the chance to hear you when you've been on town halls and other places where you've been presenting. I want to channel and home in just on the things that allow you to teach and coach people on their PPC. How did that come about?
I call it following my sparkle. It's I tell my students to follow their sparkle too. But when I moved into advertising, I never expected to be in digital. That was not what I expected to do. I did my internship. It's a pretty well-known story now that the person managing me quit on like my second day. And they were like, do you want this job? Because it was a startup, and why qualify me in any capacity? So I said, yes, I did want the job. And from there, it was a matter of like discovering what I loved, which was the strategy and the platform and the looking at an entire ecosystem and figuring out where something fits in the grander scheme of things. And then from there, it was, okay, I don't want to do a single track anymore. And then I moved to a different agency. I really liked working with my team, really liked the teaching and mentoring aspect, still love the strategy. From there, following the sparkle, the things that I liked, all the way to teaching. And I actually teach where I graduated from. So the program, I did an entire circle. It was my second degree, so it was a diploma for me, but I would not have gotten that internship or had that whole rocket ship ride for 8 years without the program that I now have the pleasure of teaching students in. So that's how, and I really like to talk, which I like to think, and connect, which I think is the speaking and the expert portion of it. I feel like I can say that about myself now that other people have said it enough.
Sure.
That's it, really.
Yeah, no, that's very cool. So, and it sounds like maybe with a baptism of fire, you had not only, your hands-on campaigns, but that you kind of had to move fairly quickly, like in a career progression, to maybe showing one or two other people how to do it and kind of nurturing others. So you all of a sudden, there's people that will at that point say, it's just faster if I could just get there myself and, let me do it at 7 screen deep and I know how to navigate down to that. But you felt more comfortable assisting that person who needs to get 7 screens deep and telling them why they need to do it. Am I right about that?
Yeah, it's a combination. I didn't really have a choice at some point. There were too many accounts, and only one me. And, I have things like a husband who needs attention and a life that I like to live outside of working.
Yeah.
And both those things I love very, very much, more than I love Google Ads. So it was partially that, but I also discovered I have a real knack for explaining elements of the platform to people, and using analogies and coming at things from different angles. I had a knack for teaching it, and it is a complicated thing to teach. When I was in school, my former teacher who taught us digital and who is now a mentor of mine and someone I get to teach with, which is really cool for me, she did a really good job, but at the time I didn't know it was a really good job,
Right.
because there's only so much a college professor can do when it comes to Google Ads and teaching it, when half the room doesn't want to learn it at the same time. And the other half are starting to I love seeing the little budding search marketers, because I can see it in their eyes and they don't know it yet, but I can see it click. But I discovered this knack from teaching clients and education with clients and education with my team. So part of it was necessity. I physically could not individually manage all the accounts.
That's right.
But the other part of it is I genuinely enjoy and have been told that I am good at teaching the concepts and explaining it to other people.
Sweet. So if we, have to hive off and just focus on that, looking at accounts, but not being the one who touches them. You said you've got kind of a bend for explaining, but I gather by that you also have to, like you do with your students, you have to understand where they're coming from. You have to know what gaps they have, as you say, that they don't know. So is that something of the same skill set that when you're just looking at a campaign to audit it, and that person who made the campaign isn't in the room right now, are you still tapping into a little bit of that? Here's what I think this is what they were going for, and they got the strategy kind of wrong, but I can kind of see what was trying to be done here. Maybe like an archaeologist tries to piece together, or maybe how a forensics team, tries to recreate something that happened in the past, just so you can understand where you'll go from here.
Yeah. So I think of myself as a detective. That's the analogy I use all the time. It's I'm investigating. It's on a crime scene. That's a terrible thing to call someone else's account. But it's I'm investigating a mystery. Some are. Yeah, some literally are, actually. And those are usually the ones with the agencies who sell things at the wazoo and then do nothing in the account. But I digress. That's not the ones I usually am encountering. When I started offering audits as a service, I wanted them to be valuable in a variety of different ways. But then it kind of meshed really well with my whole thing of it depends. Yeah. I tell my students my very first lecture is my It Depends lecture. I wear my It Depends t-shirt. They laugh at me. And then as the term goes on, when the answer to more and more of their questions is it depends, they start to see that I'm not just making it up to be funny. It's true. I'm going to make a t-shirt too, I think, that says context and coffee, because those are the two things I love the most.
Got it.
So when I approach a campaign, a good example right now is one that had that presence and interest setting turned on, that location setting turned on. And I actually didn't know if it was on purpose or not, because they're an events-based organization that could theoretically want searches from other places. So that translates into how I write about results, or how I speak about the things I find in an audit, where everything is very contextual. It's if this is on purpose, feel free to ignore me. If it's not,
okay.
here's what I think you should be doing, or here's what I would do.
Right.
It's why all my audits come with a conversation so that I can explain it too.
Perfect. And for those that are listening to this conversation, not knowing what presence and interest means, can you take 10 seconds and distinguish those?
Yes. So when you're setting your locations in Google Ads, there's a tricky little drop down called advanced settings. And if you don't click that, Google automatically sets your campaign to presence and interest, meaning that it's not just going to show to people in the location you selected, but also anyone it deems has a quote unquote interest in who you are and what you offer as related to your keywords.
Right. So a homeless hot dog vendor who wants people right around him to buy the hot dog, but I am planning a trip to his place a year from now. I get to see his hot dog ads and possibly spend his money, even though I'm nowhere close.
Yes. And I 100% of the time recommend people click presence. If you want to get people from other areas of the world, the best thing to do is target them separately in a very pointed campaign. Personally, in my opinion, that's what I believe. Google likes to make money, and they set that as, I think it's shady, but they set the presence and interest setting. But on average, when I find it, I save someone between $2,000 and $6,000 in a 3-month period because of the leakage that is happening. So that's an easy one to check yourself, folks. Just go drop down the menu and click presence, and then save yourself lots of money.
Perfect. And there are oodles of those little things that you find there. So I guess maybe let's just talk about when you're receiving campaigns to audit, and you have a choice of where you could go to look for these things. Could you maybe just tell us maybe the general areas that you look at? I'm sure a number of people who are listening here are aware that Google Ads has change history. So you can go and see a log of everything that's ever been done on an account. You may or may not, want to go into that, or there are people who like to start with understanding the structure. There are people who like to understand, at a very granular level, people who look at performance. Like, where do you start?
Yeah, I start at the same place every time, and that's the account settings and the conversions. Because if I don't understand what success is to you, or conversely, if success has been set up incorrectly, then the rest of the audit is useless.
That's a big gotcha. Yes.
So it's set up. If you think something is set up correctly, but it's double counting, for example, I actually can't audit the rest of the account properly because I'm going to be attributing success where it doesn't actually exist. I started the accounts. I start with conversion settings. I look at attribution modeling and linked accounts. And my audit is both functional in that there are high impact and urgent tasks that will make a big difference in performance, but it's also got an ease of management component to it where there's things that you could change that would just make your life easier and will have absolutely no impact on how your account performs. But I'm going to tell you about them because it's going to make your life easier in the long run. So that's things like linked accounts. Like your phone numbers won't disapprove if you use call tracking if Search Console is attached to your Google Ads account.
Yeah.
So just attach it. It's not going to have any discernible impact on your performance, but just attach it.
Yeah. But I love that because yes, if someone looks down the settings menu, you will see other Google products that Google links to. There's stuff for verification of the advertiser, some basic stuff that maybe if it's not broken right now, it will be a ticking time bomb. I'm thinking specifically of two-factor authentication and advertiser verification. Like sooner or later, we're all going to have to follow those. So it's just good practice. I shudder to ask this, but have you ever come across an account where the default view was set to like a simplified or what used to be called AdWords Express?
Smart. Smart.
Yeah.
So the way I do audits, someone expresses interest, I get access to the account. If it's smart, I tell them there's nothing for me to find because there's nothing for me to find. I can't help. My advice is free and it's don't do this campaign type.
Yes.
And then that can lead to another conversation, or it can't. But that's a templated email right there.
And so for people who, because I mean, they will roll new advertisers right in without really giving them a choice, unless you go very slowly and carefully look at your choices. So just, clue people in, please, on what is so wrong and why you put the stop sign right up when it's a smart setting.
So I wouldn't necessarily call it wrong per se, because I'm sure there's like somewhere that there's an appropriate use for that as a default setting. So I don't love my absolutes. It gives you less control. That's my big issue with it. So if you set up, for those who don't know, if you go in and you set it up, it's essentially a smart campaign. You feed the ad copy and some keyword examples to Google, but you get none of the control after. You get very limited visibility, and overall it's less levers to pull to drive success. I've also found, and I don't know if this is something that other people have found as well, if it starts as a smart account and then you switch to expert mode within that smart account shell, it actually typically underperforms for me. I have had to stop and create whole new accounts that are built in expert mode to turn around performance. That it's like almost like because it started as a smart, this is completely anecdotal, but it's almost like because it started smart, it's going to go away.
All right, Amalia. So let's dive into, once we're past the settings, once we're past some of the no-brainer aspects, now we get into looking at things where someone has structured the account in a certain way, and they've made certain types of ads, and they're going after a certain kind of objective, right? Either as a cost per click, or they've got a target CPA or a target ROAS. So from there, where do you like to do your detective work?
Yeah, so we've done account settings. I've looked at the campaign settings too a little bit at this point. So things like ad schedule, and I find a lot of bid adjustments on like max conversion bidding strategies, which aren't going to do anything. But also if you ever change it back to max clicks, those bid adjustments are going to run wild. So it's like, I found all that kind of stuff. Where the meat of my audits are though, and where I think them might be missing from some others that I've seen, like, I don't know, some people, if everyone does this, is really analyzing the structure. And I do this in a few ways. So no account is the same. It depends. But typically it involves a lot of pivot tables. And I'm looking at things like search query overlap. So for example, for this one audit that I just finished, it was 65 campaigns, $90,000 a month. Like manually, I'm not looking through every single ad group and every single keyword. No. That's 1,000 hours of work. But you can take your search query report, download it, as long as you have campaign, ad group, keyword in there, in addition to the metrics. And you can actually create a pivot table that will show you how many of those keywords in the account are triggering the same search term. And then you can address the cannibalization of those search terms, because typically there's one ad group that is outperforming the others. So I just found a keyword or a search term that appeared like 6 times in the past 3 months over 6 different places, not 6 impressions, but 6 different places. Right. And one of the dynamic ad groups that was triggering it had by far and away the best spend, conversion rate, conversion data with that search term. And so to me, we just stopped targeting it in some other places. So it's little things like that. Yeah. I also will do a pivot table for match type. So overall for the account, but then look at the individual keywords as well. I never suggest like a blanket change. So don't pause all broad match. If it's working, don't break it. But there's typically some insights you can get, like exact match keywords in this account I just finished. We're converting almost double the conversion rate at half the cost than phrase and broad. So that's something that needs looking at a little bit deeper as well. And then I look at your top 10 converting keywords and what percentage of keywords in the account actually are getting no traction whatsoever. It's typically around 60% of keywords in the past 3 months in an account have no impressions and no clicks.
Do you like to use a script for finding stuff like that, or are you still downloading at this point and trying to do that analysis on your own?
I generally do it manually, but I'm about to encounter a 230 campaign account that's probably going to make me change my mind on that one relatively soon. Yeah, the smaller ones are easier to kind of look at adjustments from a structural standpoint. And here's the thing is every ad account could be structured differently. Every single one. Nobody has a secret sauce. No one is necessarily doing the best. Like it's what you're looking at what works and you're trying to keep that happening while getting more of the good stuff. And I'm not 100% necessarily right. And so all of my audits come with, this is the best practice, or this is my best guess at what would make a difference. But the order in which you change things after is also really important. So
I'm hearing your thought process. It sounds to me like it's incremental. So, a person who has this dogmatic, all of them must be this way, people who used to speak about single keyword ad groups, right? Very militant, got to be this way. So what I'm hearing though is, let's just play with that example for a second. And let's say that you were a, person who absolutely said you have to get to single keyword ad group, SCAG. The way you find the account is nothing like that. And it sounds to me like what you're doing is you're asking, is there something that is making this worse, or is there some tweak we can make that makes it better, but building off of what's here? Because it doesn't really matter if way over there is another way to do it. That's not where we are.
Yeah. Yeah. And I have no horse in the race. I mean, you and I have talked prior to this about the fact that I don't take on long-term clients. Right. I do that on purpose. I have one long-term client. It's the team over at Rickety Roo, and I'm their PPC consultant, and I am very happy to be there. But other than that, I don't take on long-term clients at all. So I'm looking at it literally just to give my clients the best possible advice, because I have no agenda. I literally do not want the business. I want the audit, and then I want to say goodbye. Like that's how it works for me. And so I have the capability to say, oh, this might not be the way I would do it, but it's still good. It's still a good way of doing it.
Yes. Yeah, completely. And I think it makes you even better that you do have one agency, because you will then get the benefit of looking across even more accounts, maybe trying a few things on your own, seeing if they work or don't. So it keeps you fresh for when that, audited account comes in, and someone who wasn't exposed to as much would say, yep, looks good to me. But you've got more activity and you've had a chance to see across more cubicles than the person who made that one account.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's not just SEM or PPC. It's also in the SEO industry too. I think we get really caught up in our way being the best way, and there's just not a thing. I don't want to crush anyone's dreams out there, but you are not necessarily 10 times better than someone else, because like there's always going to be a different way to do it, and there is a very wrong way, but then there is a lot of right ways. And we get very caught up. Some of us get very caught up in thinking that we have the one right way. And it's just like, if anybody finds out, the entire industry will collapse.
Right. Well, and let's remember that we're in an industry that is notorious for the platform changing things over. And I have to think that because they can see every single user, that even that person that claims I have the one right way, they won't be in that position for long.
No. And I actually just, I did audit an account that was still SCAG earlier this summer, and the person didn't agree with me, and that's fine. You don't have to agree with me. I'm there to provide insights. But they thought that because I wanted to shift it to be more intent-based, that I was wrong. So I made a pivot table, as one does in all situations. Yes. And I show them, like, yes, you're skag from a keyword perspective, but look at all this search term overlap you have. Like, there is no point in keeping it separate anymore, that I've seen. Now, maybe there's an account out there, I'm sure there is, where it's still working great. And again, don't change what's broken, but I would never build that way anymore. And I used to be one of those like militant skag fanatics. So that's really funny to me.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that I notice here is that accounts will look different in their early days and then into their adolescent and mature days. It can be a function of the person who's actually got their fingers on the keys, but it can also be, I mean, I seem to think that mature campaigns and mature accounts have this robustness to them where they will be able to weather Google making a change to match types, Google making a change to, a particular micro conversion that they really found a high click-through rate on and conversion rate on. So you can have that winning strategy for a little bit, but I think time has shown that even if you get one of those, you don't want to put all your eggs in that one basket.
Yeah, for sure. You don't. And, there are excellent PPCers who still make mistakes. I still make mistakes. Like when you look at an account for days on end, it is impossible. Like you said, it all starts to like blur together. Like you're going to miss settings. You're going to duplicate this campaign, but forget to pause that keyword. And you're going to, like, we take some shortcuts, but then you're going to miss things here or there. And that over time can compound. So you can have these really old, really robust accounts that actually have these like tiny little things that are a little bit off because they've just been in existence for so long.
Right. And we're almost blind to them, right? Our bias prevents us from seeing them. I want to go further into, how we can look at not just the account itself, but other elements and maybe even other channels. But before we do that, we're going to take a really quick break.
We'll get right back to the conversation, but I'll first take a moment to talk about the switch Google's making to their whole analytics platform. There are many ways to move to Google Analytics 4 out there. And one of them that's included for free with GA4 is the web analytics data that you see in the interface, but in database form. And since you're going on a full-blown migration to a new product anyway, you should consider pulling in data from your other systems so that you can analyze and visualize them for your entire funnel. Now, you're going to have to learn some new things here, but you don't have to be overwhelmed by it when you have an expert personally guiding you. I'm going to be having these GA Fast Forward workshops as 2-day sessions where attendees leave with actual dashboard reports that show stakeholders the data that's tied to their business performance. So you can take advantage of this. And the next workshops are in Ottawa and Montreal. You can find information on them by going to gafastforward.com. So GA as in Google Analytics, and then the words fast forward. You can either use the number 4 in forward, or you can spell it all out. Either way, I'll get you there.
Okay, JJ, we're back, Amalia, and I'm so glad you gave us a rundown of what you like to do when you're exporting data and slicing and dicing and telling us what you notice just based on performance and based on the coverage of keywords and some of the other things that Google Ads will always report to you. Where else do you like to go, depending on how much scope the client gives you? Do you look any broader than that? Do you like to look at landing page copy? Do you like to look at anything beyond just what is inside Google Ads when you're trying to get the whole picture?
That's a great question. It really depends on mandate. So typically Google Ads audits, I'm just in the account, but I will caveat that with if I find an odd little performance moment or blip, like I will validate in Google Analytics. I will validate by going to landing pages, things like that. Another offering I have, which is more of like a digital health audit, really looks at the entire picture and landscape of like user journey and competitors. And I actually really love that from a strategy perspective, because I know enough about email, about SEO, about landing pages to be dangerous, but I'm not a practitioner in that space. And it gives me, because I do teach those elements at an intro level too, it gives me this really unique viewpoint of understanding what best practice is, being able to put myself in a user or buyer's like shoes, and then being able to assess where gaps are and then leave it up to someone else to fix them. Like that's
Sure.
the end of that. But I do. And part of my audits is also like a little looking at performance a little bit. And I look at visibility, click-through, which is search impression share, click-through rate, engagement metrics, and then conversions. And I think of it like a funnel. I hate the word funnel, but I think of it like a funnel where you can't have clicks without impressions. You can't have engagement without a click. You can't have a conversion without engagement. And so if there's a dip in any of those areas or a trend down in any of those areas over time, it gives me something to look at. And sometimes that thing is the landing page or is the website or is Google Analytics. So I kind of let the carpet, like the red carpet, just like unfurl as I'm walking down it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, totally. Or I'm picturing maybe more of a medical thing where, our vital stats are the first thing that are checked, right? You go for the basic ones. They aren't necessarily going to tell a physician exactly what's wrong with someone, but they can give you just a little bit to get you started on knowing which avenue you're going to go down next.
Rarely I find that there are major impacts from changing the ads at the level I'm looking at when I'm looking at an audit of this size. So don't get me wrong, the ads do impact something. Like I don't want to say the ads and the messaging are not important. However, I do have a strong suspicion that most people don't read the entirety of an ad before clicking on it off of the Google search engine results page, because there's some terrible copy out there. Not that we've written, that Google is now automating. So I do pay less attention on the like large scale to the ad copy specifically, not to say that changes there can't have an impact, but often they aren't going to be like what swings an account from, underperforming to performing. Simply changing ad copy is not going to be what does it, in my experience.
Yeah. No, but I love how you've got a few things that, again, allow people to go and maybe do some further looking. You are able to say to them, look, for other accounts where the setup is basically the same, but maybe the, quality score for, ads is way different in your case from theirs. And I can't help but notice that you're not performing and they do. So it's good to give people, even if it isn't specifically inside of the account, something that they can go and work on later.
And typically it manifests as a low click-through rate.
Yeah.
So typically I will
that's the vital sign, right?
Yeah, that's the vital sign. So you have 65 campaigns and 5 of them have a click-through rate that's like 4 or 5% lower than the other campaigns. Well, what is it? What is it about those ads? What is it about that? Click-through rate's not just ads though. It could also be the keywords and the ads relevancy piece.
Yep.
But in the most recent one I did, it was because Google just stopped serving the ETAs and they didn't have an RSA to take its place.
Okay.
So it was a matter of not being up to date. So that goes back to the order of operations. Once you are going to make changes, as I told them, write those ads first, because those accounts, those campaigns, they might recover simply because now they have an RSA. So don't go weed whacking the whole thing.
Yes, that's right.
Just water the plant.
Yeah. And maybe a bit of light pruning, but don't go nuts. Don't clear cut. Since you brought up things like expanded text ads going to responsive search, Performance Max is another one where you may not be seeing it in many of your audits. There are probably some that are still sitting this one out for the time being. But, I'm wondering whether or not you've got either any advice for someone who is trying to look for data that they might use to audit their own Performance Max account, or that you have a chance to look at a Performance Max campaign and give your 2 cents?
I've looked at them. I have run one,
Okay.
begrudgingly.
Yeah.
Recently, actually, like a week ago, I started it. I was sitting this one out for a while. I still don't think it's great for lead gen. So what I will say about Performance Max is nothing I'm about to say has anything to do with ecom. So if you run an ecom
very good. Yep.
campaign,
No, that's useful.
Me.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't do ecom. I don't do ecom audits or run ecom accounts. I can and I have, but I leave that to the experts in that
So
space.
you're working exclusively for ones where there's usually a sale offline and the conversion is get in touch with us.
A point of contact form, phone call, something. Yeah. And for that, I actually don't love Performance Max. My cynical and very biased opinion is that Google has dumped its worst inventory into Performance Max from display and Gmail and all these placements, combined it with not giving us enough data, and it's a little bit just running amok. I have yet, in the ones that I have seen, I've yet to see a Performance Max campaign outperform the well-organized search campaigns in an account. And the lack of control, specifically from the negative keyword standpoint, really bothers me. That being said, if you are running it, I mean, honestly, good for you. That sounds sarcastic, but I mean, like, good for you, because it is the way of the future. I believe Google's moving us there.
Agreed.
I don't think we're going to be able to get away from it.
Yep.
Which is why I've started running one, because otherwise I'm behind the 8 ball. What I will say is look at the Insights tab, look at the categories and the search queries that you are showing up for. Look at the information it will give you and decide what you need to either put in as a keyword elsewhere to keep Performance Max from bidding on it, because that's how it works. If it's a keyword somewhere else in the account, Performance Max won't bid, or what you need to add as an account level negative once they actually roll those out. So, for example, the word cheap or affordable.
Right. So we're recording this in early Q4 of 2022. And Amalia, I gather you're referring to the fact that you need to contact a Google rep if you're looking for high-level negative keywords. And the rumor has it that there'll be something that we can self-serve on. So
I saw today that account level is rolling out. So I saw today that people have access to it. However, that's still problematic that you need a support rep to add a negative keyword list at the campaign level for PMax. I have a lot of feelings about that.
They may not consider it problematic. They may be just fine with that.
They probably are, because they make a lot of money and they use a lot of branded terms.
Just to wrap on this topic, I sense what you're also doing, and would I be right in guessing that for accounts that you're auditing today and going forward, if you don't see any Performance Max, you're probably at least jotting down a note. I'm not sure how big a fan you are of account history score, if it exists, but the point is to start getting data on things that are using new tools, new algorithms, because tomorrow's going to be here really soon. And as you say, it is the way of the future. So if we are going to try and figure out how we're going to survive in it, it's best to perhaps at least look at it. So when you look at an account and you see things that are clearly dated, I bet there alone, you're making notes to just say, okay, start doing this, start doing that.
There are broad match modified keywords that I was looking at this morning.
Oh my gosh.
They behave like broad, but they should still be switched over to broad.
Yes.
In my opinion. I also looked at an account today that had the old text ads, not even extended text ads.
Oh my goodness. Standard text ad.
Yeah. Like the standard
25.
At this point, you're probably just penalizing yourself, because even though they're running, I bet you they'd be running a lot better if they were.
Unless it's for like a company that sells books with haikus in them.
Yeah, right. Because that gives you the ad space. But no, I am making a note, and that's why I started running like my Performance Max begrudgingly, very begrudgingly. But history has shown that Google does not care what Amalia thinks. So chances are I'm going to have to get on board, and I can't be of service to my clients if I'm not testing these things. However, I did wait what I believe was as long as I could possibly wait before I started. And I'm starting in an account that has budget to spare. I'm starting in an account that spends $70,000 a month, which is no small peanuts. So that if I break everything, it's not someone's livelihood, because that's the real issue I have with Google Ads, is that there's a lot of small businesses that rely on certain things that can't afford. Like, the narrative I hear from the other side all the time is, well, just give it time. And it's like, what small business do you know that has 4 months at $1,000 a month to give something time when they rely on their business to pay their rent or feed their child or whatever it is? Like, and then you could make the argument they shouldn't be in business, but I would make the argument that we should support them in developing their business. And that's where we would probably agree to disagree. But I get very passionate about that.
Yes. And I mean, that's great. And in B2B, let's remember that there are probably sales reps who, they could very inefficiently dial for dollars and cold prospect, but we have conditioned many companies to think you can simply use ads, and if you run them, then the leads will show up, and then the rep can close. And you're right. If we aren't seeing performance out of those things, there's a very real person. There's a paycheck on the line. There's a quota to be met. Let's not be so coy about, giving or learning time, or, run just a little experiment just for no reason. We have to do things deliberately.
And that's what really boils my blood when Google makes things like the presence and interest setting just so unaccessible, or like defaults to smart campaigns.
Right.
It's like, these people don't know. They don't want to know. They want to run their business. They don't want to think about these elements in Google Ads, these like secret settings that like, it shouldn't be so hidden and convoluted.
Yeah. And you've landed on such an important point here. The audit, you're treating everyone alike. And I think that's wonderful, because I don't want anybody to get the impression that Amalia is that she's got her gun trained on a person who set up a campaign. She is just as much looking at how even a person with good intentions has run afoul of Google's shenanigans on burying settings and making it harder to do the things that are already hard enough.
And most of the time, like, I never point fingers with an audit. I will say that one time out of I think I'm in the 50s now for how many audits I've done since my business has started. But I will say one time an agency has been fired over my audit.
Okay.
But nowhere in that document will you see any recommendation to that effect. It's all facts. It's this spend has leaked to these countries, and this structure, like, you're matching to these terms that have nothing to do with your business. And the change history hasn't been accessed in 3 months. Like, it's all facts.
Yes.
And never once was it, these people don't know what they're doing, because so often there are different ways of doing things right. We're all trained differently by different people. And so often and I'm sure people could go through my account and find things that I could do better. I'm positive of it. Like, I 100% am sure. Sometimes my juniors are like, why did you do this? And I'm like, I don't know. Past Amalia was clicking a button.
Second pair of eyes, right?
It would be very hypocritical of me to go into audits with the attitude that somebody has messed up. And my end goal is always better performance for the business that hired me. It does not matter if they did the ads, if an agency did the ads, if they've had multiple freelancers. I don't even want to know who it is. Right. I just want to give them output and data that's going to let them make better decisions in the future.
I've got a picture of you as the statue of justice you see outside of court buildings with the blindfold on, only for, looking, not worrying about who did it, right?
Yeah.
But you're lifting up the blindfold to look very carefully at the account.
Yes.
tell me when people are maybe branching out to Microsoft ads. So they've got maybe a scheduled import happening and they're trying to run those two things together. Do you ever broaden an audit to look at that?
I have not, but I would. Most of my clients that have hired me have not had Microsoft ads. My top 3 tips for Microsoft ads would probably be make sure you look at it as its separate entity, because it is a separate entity. So while I'm a fan of the import button round 1, or with major changes, I'm not a fan of the ongoing import automated, because you're making changes for one platform and then just transposing them into another.
Yes.
I will say that
I will put my hand up and say we just ran afoul of that a few days ago with, something that wasn't supposed to happening because, accounts came back on, which they had been paused over on Google, but just because there was new data in them, that we were, in draft. Microsoft said, oh, I guess you want those back on. No.
Yeah.
So
that auto
that
import.
happens.
And then I use way more broad match in Microsoft because they don't have the volume.
Correct.
So I use broad match a lot more. That's never something I would tell someone in Google Ads to do.
No.
And then the third thing is watch your budgets, because if they do turn back on, if one day Google doesn't work and for that single day everyone has to use Microsoft ads and your budget is set to $2,000 a day because you haven't been getting anything, all of a sudden you spend $2,000. Like, is that likely to happen? Probably not. But if it does, you're going to want to be like, I was smart and had a realistic budget.
Better safe than sorry.
100%.
In the recommendations, I know that when you deliver an audit, you've got, spreadsheets, you've got, written docs. Are any of them speaking to the team, or maybe, that they would pass on to their agency counterpart? Anything that you try to encourage people to do as far as processes that, maybe you're getting the feel that they're not quite tight, or that, there just doesn't seem to be gelling between, the folks working on creative and the folks working on, loading ads. Is there anything like that that you do or that you discuss when you're presenting an audit?
Yeah. So I'm a big annotation fan. I'm a big in Google Ads annotation fan. And so I explain that every single time. You're going to do this major change. You're going to write it right here. And that way, when things break, you're going to go, oh, this is the little graph. Look at where it broke. Look at the thing I did that day. And you're going to undo the thing. Documenting was something my team, I like to think, hated me for a little bit. Like, I'm pretty sure they're like, documentation. But now I think most of them see the value of it, because I used to make them write notes on each account for major things that they did. Because in agency, accounts change hands all the time. You're covering a vacation, even for yourself. And I do it now still for me. So notes and annotations, super valuable. If a company hires me because they want to bring their ads internal, so I have had that happen a couple times where I'm then doing training for the team. So they do the audit.
Yep.
They decide that they want to train someone in-house to manage it.
Yep.
I do 5 hours typically worth of training with their team. And then I go on email support for a period of time. So I'm not managing the ads. I'm just helping the person managing the ads. Yep. Then I also will help with the development of processes. So how to do a search query, how to check a search query report, how to look at that funnel we talked about a little bit earlier, a few onboarding documents so that if someone else ever needs to take over that role, the basics are documented on how to do something. Yeah. So I have standard ones that I send to some of my one-on-one clients, and then also if I'm doing training. So that's the extent of that kind of advice piece from the people and processes side.
Yeah, and the only point I'd add, because I really can't add anything to that, is just people should wean themselves off the thought that Google Ads and GA have provided you with everything that you need to do to be set up for success on what you're doing. So when she mentions annotations, when she mentions extra documents and processes for how to do things, this is the way that people who are really rocking it in the industry do it. They know that you don't get a complete tool set with what comes out of the box. You have to have a few things of your own.
Yeah, and you really can't rely on that first hire in that space to be there forever. And I think that's something that actually a lot of companies do really poorly, and it's really unfair, is that person doesn't owe you anything beyond the 40 hours or whatever their contract says with you. And they don't have to tell you when they're leaving. They don't have to tell you when they're looking for another job. They don't have to even tell you why. Their job is to do the work that they were hired to do. And a lot of bosses get very emotionally attached to the person. I've heard a lot of, my boss called me ungrateful for quitting. Like, that's just BS. If you're not prepared for the one person doing your ads to leave, that's your fault. Make them document what they do now and get them
I was going to say, and
put
it's
things together.
For sure. And it's doubly your fault if you've never asked them to document, because, a little bit of time here and there will make that day that they tell you that they're leaving completely different from your perspective, right?
And before I have a whole bunch of PPC specialists come after me, please also give them time to document, because it takes time to do it right.
Carve out white space. Yeah.
Give them a few hours a week. Don't just be like, in addition to the 40 hours you currently have, document, because then they're all going to come after me, and that's not what we want here.
Right.
You have to give them space. It's a lot of time up front. It really is a lot of work and time up front, but it can save you eons of time with training. And especially my one tip to managers is have the most junior employee on the team be responsible for updating the docs, because they're the ones that are using it the most often. So they're in there and they see a mistake. Oh, this setting has changed. This button has changed. It's their job to write the new sentence.
They can take a screen grab.
Yep. Exactly. And then it becomes this living document, because that's the other thing I get is, why would I have someone write these documents if it's going to go out of date? Well, the most junior person on the team, part of their job description is updating those documents, because they're the ones who are going to use them.
Yeah. And to anyone who fights us on that, I would simply say,
find me on Twitter.
They can certainly look for help, but if they go, I often hear the retort, but it's all on the internet. And I do say, when was the last time that you sat in front of the Google Ads help documentation library and searched for something, and within 20 seconds found something that you can just now get to work on? Mm-hmm. You're going to spend way too much time hunting, and things are being deprecated, and you'll follow these rabbit trails that'll lead you nowhere.
And so much of the advice that ranks highly on those search engine results pages are meant to rank highly. They're not actually great advice. There are some exceptions out there that do both rank highly and provide excellent advice. Like Optimizer's responsive search ad study. I have referred it to multiple people in the last little while. But that's something too, is you can't always, because there's so many ways of doing things, the way that your person finds by Googling may not be the way you want them to do things. And when I said find me on Twitter, I meant to argue with me, not to get help. I was like, because you said, if you're going to fight with us, I was like, just find me and we can have the fight. I love healthy debates.
I'm with you too. They can take either one of us on if they believe that they can get by without documenting. Okay, so I want to finish on one topic that brings out the commercial aspect of doing audits, the time involved. You have a paid audit service. And yet there are some who will offer free audit services to prospects. So can you weigh in on what we should think about that?
Spicy. Yes, I can. So I will start by saying I have many friends who offer free audits of high quality, and this is in no way, I'm not saying that blanket paid ads are better quality, because I don't think that's true. I don't think you can make an absolute statement like that.
Yep.
What I will say is that a free audit is almost always a sales tool in two ways. It's a sales tool for the agency or the person doing the audit to see if they want to bring on a client, because clients can be nightmares. And so it can be their way of vetting a client and their past account history. And they see that 6 agencies have been in there in the last 2 months. Yeah. That's a red flag for them. but it's also a way for them to essentially say, look at all the things we found and all the things we could do for you. And in my opinion, those free audits tend to focus on the bad and not the good. They'll focus on all the areas of improvement because that's how they get you to sign on with them. Again, contextually speaking, not all of them. I like the paid audit model from both an agency and
thank you. Yes.
And a client side. I like it from an agency perspective because if they choose to take the audit and walk away, you have money for the time that someone has spent doing it. Audits take time.
And rules of engagement, I think, are different there, because while the agency would be happy to bring on that account after the audit, what's being done in this transaction is values delivered for recognition. And if they part ways at that point, both sides should be happy.
Exactly. Absolutely. I have friends who work in agency where they get put on audits, the client never signs, and then the agency is at the same time saying there's no extra funds for things like mental health days or conferences. And it's like, well, maybe. Do you understand how this looks to the people who are doing the audit? They spend 6 hours doing it for free. The client never signs on, and then you tell them that you can't support them as a member of your team. So from that management perspective too. But for the client, I like paid audits, and I'm very biased because I like the type I do where I'm not going to bring you on after, because you can trust it better. I feel like there is a level of trust in a situation where you're paying for something. There's that value exchange, and I don't know. I'm a fan of the paid audit. Clearly, that's what I do. But I think that the free audit, if you know that it's being used as a sales tool and you understand the lens at which someone's approaching it, go for it. I'm not saying never get a free audit of your account. I just prefer the paid for a variety of reasons.
Sure.
That's my 2 cents on that topic.
Or I think if we even back it up to, we say, a very cursory review, and at that point, we're even widening it not only to an agency person who, maybe 20 minutes, just because it's going to be part of a discovery call where the questions can be a little bit more focused. But there are even online tools where you can make an API connection to your account and run a, simulated scoring on it and, get some interesting information. So, I think an advertiser should be able to avail themselves of any of those, don't you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do.
But don't don't confuse that with a full-blown audit.
Right. And there are discovery calls, and even with among the paid audits, and the free audits, all the types of audits, there's different depths that people will go to. I have friends who offered pay audits who do more like a green and a red system. So this is good, this is bad, but there's less in-depth roadmap at the end of it. I also have friends who do a free version of that. And so it's know what you're getting out of it. Almost if you're approaching an audit situation, ask yourself, is it free? Is it paid? Okay, if it's free, how in depth are they going? What might their motives be? What might my motives be? Just have an idea of the landscape. Yeah. And if it's paid, you want to understand what the output is and how much time and energy is going into it. I question people, and I'm sorry if anyone's listening and does this, but I question people who have a standard paid audit price for accounts of different sizes and depths.
Yes.
Because when someone comes to me with one campaign, that's a $600 audit. That's it.
Right.
When someone comes to me with 65 campaigns, we're in the thousands of dollars.
Right.
And it's both time and value based how I price. So if you go to someone and say you want an audit, and they just quote you a price, per hour would be okay, but a standard project price without looking at your account, then I would have a lot of questions in that scenario.
Yeah. No, excellent point on the sizes there. I wouldn't have a home inspector who, I wouldn't trust one that, charges the same for a little tiny bungalow as they do for a monstrous mansion. That's just, it doesn't make sense. And as you say,
sorry, it's going to be $15,000 to inspect my condo. Like that is
right. Because that's what they would have to do to protect themselves. So You're absolutely right there. Amalia, I know you've got a number of ways that people can keep tabs on the things that you're talking about, not only with your consultancy, but also with a newsletter. Can you tell us where we could hook in to all things related to Amalia?
Oh my gosh, yes. So my consultancy is called Good AF Consulting. You can find it right now, me, on Twitter at Amalia E. Fowler, or on LinkedIn under Amalia Fowler. There is no site as of yet, but stay tuned. That's a couple months away in the mix for Good AF. And then I also write The Wholehearted Manager, which is a newsletter for managers who lead with their heart and who bring all of themselves to work, because it is impossible to leave emotions at the door. And you can find that at WholeheartMNGR on Twitter, or in my bio link at Amalia E. Fowler right now. I think you might actually even be able to Google it and find it. I'm not sure. But that's where I am. I'm headed to New York for the Day of Learning and Happiness soon. And then you can probably find me at MozCon or PPC, Hero Conf, and all of those places next year. But as of right now, no specific speaking gigs upcoming. But plenty of recorded ones out there on the internet, including another episode of Glenn's podcast.
Yay! All right. Yes, just another place that Amalia is spreading the goodness. Thank you again for coming on the show.
Oh my gosh, no problem. I love coming on your show. So if you decide to have me back for a third time, we will find a time, Glenn.
That's awesome. And to those listening, I know that you came away with benefits of how to look at accounts, even if you work with somebody who is on this and struggling. Just offer your help. It's a great way to make sure that people are not letting Google take all their money and try to make things even better. And that's what this whole podcast is about. So I hope that you've left with something that makes your funnel even better.
Thanks for listening. Follow the show on Twitter at Funnel Reboot. If you like what you have heard today, please consider leaving a review wherever you get your podcasts.